Music, my beloved, I'd never get through the day without you. In fact, I've become so dependent on melodies that if I forget my headphones at home, my entire day is completely thrown off. And on one such day, I began thinking about how fun it would be to have little theme songs playing movie montage style that only you could hear, thus eliminating the need for headphones. But that also got me thinking about what my theme song would be, which ultimately led to what songs I thought could fit the Twisted Wonderland cast. So today I'm going to be sharing my subjective findings with you all, and unfortunately, due to copyright reasons, I'm not going to be able to play these songs in this video for you. However, I've consulted with my team of experts and we've come up with an ingenious solution: a Spotify playlist. Not sponsored. The songs are ordered in character order so you can listen along to that playlist with this video to be able to fully immerse yourself if you so choose. It's not a perfect solution since I don't think this will work well for mobile viewers, and I don't think some of the songs are long enough to cover all of my yapping, but it is still something. So click that link in the description for the full experience. Also, as always, we'll be discussing EN server story content throughout, and the very first section of this video will show footage from the anime trailer, so be mindful of that. Additionally, I listen to a lot of music that is in languages I do not understand, so for some song choices, I'm working off translations that may not be entirely accurate, and most importantly, not all the songs are family friendly, so consider yourself warned. Now then, let's start off with you, who doesn't usually get included in my rankings, but I think that Your New Home by Gooseworks works so well that I can't leave you out here. I mean, Pomni's situation is not that dissimilar to Yu's, and I think their introductions to their respective worlds are quite mind altering in their own unique ways. Throughout the entire Twist story so far, Yu is just trying to get home, and I believe that's also still Pomni's goal as far as I'm aware. I'm not caught up, but the song itself really encapsulates that moment of realization that, oh no, this is real and it's not something I can easily escape from. I think this song also works for every incarnation of you because I can't imagine that any person without prior knowledge of the Twisted Wonderland universe would just easily accept their new reality in that orientation moment, and the instrumental is generic enough that it can work for many different types of people, which fits you since they are not really meant to represent one specific person, as most MC characters are. So for Grim, our resident glutton, I had to go with Super Tuna by Jin. It's a simple song about the love a fisherman has for the fish that he's catching, specifically tuna, although there are some other fish thrown in there too. And there is nothing more to it than that. Nothing at all. Now, Grim isn't solely obsessed with tuna, but it is his favorite food, and he'll do pretty much anything for a can of the stuff. So I think a song that shares that same love represents him quite well. It's also upbeat and catchy, which also fits Grimm's general attitude since nothing ever seems to get him down, or at least he doesn't let anything keep him down for very long. Now then, Riddle. There is an obvious choice here for him that I've seen in a lot of Twist playlists, which is Queen of Hearts by Royal Scandal, and it does fit, I think, but because I've seen it so often, it feels overdone to me. So instead, I'm going to give Riddle a song that I think fits his struggles and backstory a bit more, and that's Harpy Hair by Yellowcre. As I understand it, this song is about an overbearing mother, one who coddles to protect, but that coddling instead smothers her children, killing their spirit or burying them, as the lyrics say. The vocals are hauntingly good, and the strong, demanding "Tell Me So I Say" near the end of the song sends shivers down my spine. And I think it's a question that Riddle perhaps subconsciously wants to ask. He just doesn't have the voice for it. Perhaps for him, it's less of a demand and more of a desperate curiosity. But if he's not going to ask, then I am, because this woman is something else, forcing him to study, isolating him, and even going so far as to decide Riddle's favorite color for him gets my blood boiling. Riddle was basically shaped by his mother, and he's only just now starting to break out of this cage, so I think this song is pretty fitting for where he seems to be at in game and in his story. Now, Trey, on the other hand, is much harder for me to pick for because I just don't really think too much about him, unfortunately. He's just kind of there, which is honestly probably something he'd appreciate me saying, given how normal he wants to be and appear. So I'm going to give this super normal guy the Coconut Mall theme from Mario Kart. I just feel like this song completely encapsulates the chaos that is Trey's life trying to manage Riddle and keep peace in Hearthstable. He's not overly strict or serious, but he's also not completely laid back, and I feel like this instrumental is the perfect mix of both. It's nice and calming, but it has a little pep, making it not completely chill, and that just feels like a very Trey thing to me. I also heavily associate coconuts with sweets, even though I really only ever consume coconut milk, which I also usually only use to make savory curries. So I don't really know why this connection is so prominent in my brain. But since this is Coconut Mall and coconuts mean sweets, that also ties to Trey for me given his baking habits. I also think he mentions coconuts at some point, perhaps in the Firelight Sky event, because he's used to the dry stuff for baking and not the fresh stuff like in the event. So there's that too. For Cater, I went with a song that's a bit more chill, kind of upbeat still, and one that I think has a bit of depth to it that kind of matches his vibe. I didn't want to go with something overly poppy because I don't think that's Cater's vibe. And while he is a happy extrovert, I just feel like he would appreciate something grittier. Perhaps not rock specifically, but I just cannot imagine him liking girly pop songs given his sisters. So I went with Don't Touch My Ladder by Tom Cardy feat. Louis Zong because it's a bit more chill, it's still kind of upbeat, and I think the metaphor of removing the Sims ladder works for Cater. The guy is holding it together, but there's clearly something under the surface that he's contesting with, and I think some of his coping mechanisms might be similar to the pool ladder in the Sims games. Without Magicam, he might be lost and, worst case scenario, unable to survive, just like how the Sims need the ladder to get out of the pool, otherwise, they will cease to exist. Admittedly, that's a bit over dramatic of a comparison, but I do think contending with the sorts of deep feelings Cater alludes to dealing with can at times feel like you're barely keeping your head above water. So that's a bit more of a reasonable connection here, I think. In either case, relying on these coping mechanisms and not finding alternatives, like, using your arms and legs to hoist yourself from the water, or getting a friend to help you out, which Cater could do because Trey is right there, is a bit on Cater, I guess. But he's also young and has a lot of time to get that stuff sorted out. Is this the metaphor intended by the song? I have no idea. I don't think so. But as I was listening to it on loop, I finally understood what the heck the ladder was, which admittedly took me way too long to figure out, given that the entire song is referencing The Sims, not just the ladders. But my mind drifted straight to Cater once my synapses fired. Plus, I think the chorus kind of works as an affirmation of sorts to remind you that there are many other things in life that are way more worthy of your attention and time than your anxieties, like fighting crime or pricing goods. At least that's how I have decided to interpret it, and I think it also works for Cater too, given his situation, so that's what I decided to give him here. Next is Deuce, who I gave a song that is just so funny to me because I do not understand any of the lyrics except I'm a tough cookie. And I think it's such a beautiful sentiment for this guy who's also happens to be a tough cookie. Yes, Deuce's theme song is Tough Cookie by Zico. I can't help but smile every time I think of this song, and Deuce has an earnestness to him that also makes me smile. At the end of the day, Deuce is a battle hardened delinquent that's trying his darndest to be an honor student, but at his core, he's still kind of a delinquent. And there is no way that he'd have the reputation he does at home if he wasn't tough. Yet Deuce is also a sweetheart with morals and a great deal of loyalty to his friends and to his boss, so I can't help but feel that the cookie part matches this softer side of him. The rest of the song is typical self glazing, I'm the best there's ever been type stuff that's expected in this genre, which in some ways also ties to Deuce, but some of the specific lyrics, or at least how they were translated in the translation I found, are a bit counter to his character. However, I think if you isolate the chorus and use that as Deuce's walk on music to like a wrestling match or something, the song fits ridiculously well. And now I can't stop thinking of a pouty Deuce sitting in a bathtub of chocolate chip cookies, thinking about how tough a cookie he is. And it's glorious. For Ace, my head was empty. It had no thoughts. I just couldn't think of a song for him for the longest time, and I don't really know why. For as much as I dunk on Ace, I don't hate the guy, and he has a lot of other good qualities that I think can outweigh the bad. But for some reason, it took me such a long time to come up to the conclusion that Rules by the Hoosers kinda suits him. One of the big positive things Ace has going for him is his ability to speak harsh truths regardless of the consequences. He's not afraid to point things out to those standing in his way, and when he does so, it's exceptionally cathartic. The moment after the punch, where he tells Riddle off in book one and forces Riddle to confront his inequities, is not only necessary for both of their characters, but connects to the main chorus lines of this song. You know you're never gonna get to have the final say, you don't make the rules. Sure, Riddle is the house warden, but he's not a monolithic godlike entity, and if people revolt like they end up doing in book one, then all of those rules and all of that power is a bit meaningless, right? And the rules he's following aren't even technically his, so there's that too. But Ace also brings the truth to the Ghost Bride in her event as she's manipulating her situation and the words of others to get something she thinks she's entitled to. But it's actually something that can harm her long term since she's going about it in the completely wrong way. I can see this somewhat relating to the lines, "Who was it that told you that the world's not flat? It's a reputable source. Can it be taken as fact?" Which is a very funny line, honestly, but I think it also makes sense for Eliza since she's taking everything she's been told by her retainers as fact, even though it's largely just been placation. Even during Playful Land, Ace is spitting facts at both Kalim and Ernesto. People didn't always get along, though, did they? People didn't always like each other, did they? Works for both of these characters because Kalim is assuming Ernesto will be kind and understanding if met with kindness, which is not true. And Ernesto is assuming that everything that he's doing is justified because of those that hurt him, which is also not true. But Ace isn't someone who can make rules either. He can only work within those confines. And even though he's a bit rebellious, I truly think he has a good understanding of how the world works and what he can and cannot do within it. And he's not afraid to point out these factors to others, which is something that I at least get out of this song, even if that is not quite its intended meaning. Moving on to Savannah Claw, we're going to start off with Leona, who is receiving a rather heavy song, but I think the lyrics, at least in the translations I found, speak to his journey and the complicated feelings that he's still grappling with. So his song here is going to be Remember the Urge by the Gazette. This band has been one of my favorites for years, and while it's been quite a while since I've listened to this particular track, I just can't help but feel like it resonates with Leona. I can kind of see him in the described hopelessness of the subject of the song, as Leona was once a hopeful child himself, but over time his light grew dimmer as the constant comparisons and whispered rumors weighed him down. Those ugly memories, if you will. It's gotten to the point where trying is meaningless for him because Leona's concluded that his actions and intentions simply don't matter. At least that seems to be the case. This same script keeps getting repeated over and over to him, of him not being good enough. And at this point, it may not even just be other people, it could just be himself who's repeating it. Yet, even with all of this emotional baggage that he carries, Leona still has the urge to prove himself and he still desires that connection with others, desires their praise, and ultimately to be seen for who he really is. While these desires are marred by darkness, they're still in him somewhere, and while it's a bit hard for him to articulate or realize this since he can't see himself objectively, I think Leona has at least started to work on uncovering these things post book 2. This song seems to present a similar predicament, although the specifics don't match exactly, and there is a hopeful overtone in the melody that I think balances the more melancholic lyrics well for this type of consideration. At least in the translations I found, it feels like this song is one where the subject is trying to reconcile their desires with their current circumstances and perhaps trying to figure out how to break free of those negative feelings. I also find the last line of the song in this translation to be particularly impactful for Leona. At the edge of a crumbling world, what remains? Is a question that is very open for interpretation, but I think the way one answers it reflects their perspective heavily. And for Leona, I think this, or at least this sentiment, isn't too uncommon. His special magic literally creates a crumbling world as it dusts whatever his focus is on, so the line can connect in that way as well. But I'm not really qualified to provide that sort of analysis. Honestly, I'm probably not qualified to be giving any of these analyses, but I just can't help but feel like he vibes with this song, so that is what I'm giving him. Next is Ruggie, who is our resident hustler, so you know that he's gotta have work by ATs as his backing track. Man is concerned about his coin 24/7, and while he sometimes doesn't use the most legal means to obtain these coins, he's still out there getting his purse, which is basically what this song is about, no? I think Ruggie's ultimate goal is financial stability for himself and his grandma, and he's gonna do whatever he can to make the most out of the opportunities he's afforded. He's no stranger to hard work. He's even cozied up to his own golden goose, Leona, from whom he's been able to obtain lessons and other non tangibles that are, in a way, worth more than gold. The lyrics largely revolve around the hustle and getting your bag, with a few flexing lines thrown in here and there, so I think it really fits the drive that Rocky has in pursuit of this goal. It's very catchy, it has a nice rhythm to it as well that I think can suit Ruggie. And overall, the song is just simple, straight to the point, and very true to Ruggie and his character and what we get to see. So that's what I'm leaving him with here. The last up in Savannah Claw is Jack, who sometimes strikes me as a cowboy kind of guy with his lone wolf tendencies and whatnot, so I'm giving him Big Iron by Marty Robbins. This song is essentially a story about an Arizona ranger who's going after a big bad outlaw that's been trouble round these parts and who apparently also has been quite a challenge to take down given that everyone else who's tried has failed. But this guy, this ranger, he ain't backing down from this challenge one bit. You know who else loves a challenge and relies on his own strength to complete said challenge? Jack Howell. We see Jack in various story beats continuing to push himself and train himself to be better. Part of the reason he came to this school was because he was inspired by Leona and wanted, I think, in part to challenge him, so Jack could prove his own mettle. Just like the unnamed Arizona Ranger, Jack is determined, skillful, and unrelenting. Jack is also really good at what he does. In fact, it's the sole reason that there's even a problem in Leona's dorm uniform vignette, because Jack is just too good at spell drive and his upperclassmen aren't. So, a song like this that speaks to that sort of confidence, determination, and skill, I think matches Jack extremely well. At least to me. And now Octave now and Azul. Ah, Azul, our capitalist icon, our businessman with a business plan that's not getting a Tom Cardy song, although I think it would be super funny for him to be the cop and for Jade to be the sniper. But honestly, did you not read the colony policy that defines you as company property? Because it's in the fine print by the Stupendium, which is a song that perfectly encapsulates Book 3 Azul. Even though Azul's not as aggressively taking advantage of, helping those poor unfortunate souls, since his contract ban was put in place post Book 3, he's still a guy that weighs every interaction by its profitability. He's entirely driven by spite and is constantly looking for the next opportunity to get ahead. So having this lovely little anthem playing behind him would at least warn those aforementioned unfortunate souls of who they're dealing with. Perhaps it would be kinder to have this song be the Book 3 theme rather than Azul's theme specifically, as the indentured workers and contractees waiving their rights to autonomy in exchange for that study guide really resonates with the song lyrics that literally state that the workers are indentured and that they are waived away their autonomy. The world of the deep sea can also feel a little bit like space, which I think is a nice connection to the song's setting and Azul's home. Sure, a space conglomerate is still very different from an octopus businessman, but being in an unfamiliar place with no means to easily escape is extremely reminiscent of our friend's plight in Book 3. We even have to go to the Coral Sea to resolve this problem, which is completely foreign territory where the eels have near complete control, kind of like the agents of the conglomerate in the song. I feel like Azul's journey specifically has been less about easing his pursuit of profit and more about shifting his motivation for pursuing those profits, which might be why his character can still feel a bit stiff with his seemingly sole focus on business, odds, and debts. Azul is always going to be business minded. There's nothing that's going to really stop that. He's just got to figure out a better or healthier motivation for it than simply spite. Because if that aspect goes away or changes, I imagine his greed might mellow out a bit. However, as it stands, he's very much like the conglomerate and architect in the song, so I think these vibes do suit him, even if the song's contents are partially tied to his prior actions. Next up is Jade, who gave me so much trouble with this. He's got a very specific vibe, which one might assume would make him easy to place. But I kept finding more and more songs that I thought could fit, and soon enough I had a lengthy list for Jade and literally no songs for anyone else. But I'm really proud of myself because I narrowed it down to 4 without using the wheel, which I then used to decide between the 4, but that's neither here nor there. Jade is getting Red Flags by Tom Cardy, which is way too goofy of a song, I think, for him and his gentlemanly manners. But the actual scenario within the song is similar to several scenarios we've seen Jade actually in. For context, the song is about a date that is going well until it is revealed that one of the participants is a huge fan of the movie Human Centipede for interesting reasons, which is a shocking revelation that's right up Jade's alley. I feel like he would absolutely drop this bombshell for the hell of it, just to see your reaction, and there isn't a good way to tell if he's joking or being serious. And this sort of thing happens several times throughout various story beats in Twisted Wonderland. We get to see Jade act all sweet and innocent in his ceremonial robes vignette, only to then reveal that he's created an entire dossier on each and every Octave and L student, with every single piece of information possible, for nefarious uses. In Floyd's dorm uniform vignette, Jade makes the seemingly harmless yet ominous remark that he's glad I chose you as my partner when we were but little elvers, implying the existence of other siblings that no longer exist for reasons unknown. In his Beans Day vignette, we get a couple of sadistic leaning comments once Jade is set up to snipe some monsters. In the Harvest and Hometown event, we get 2 little treats, the first of which is when they're visiting Epel's house and Jade says he's got a certain number of family members, for now, and that's it, no further context. Later on, he also remarks on how lovely it would be to watch an octopus desperately tug a sled through the mountains, unsettling those around him. It seems like Jade just likes to drop these little nuggets of information to watch the reactions that result, and maybe he's being serious, maybe he's joking, but either way, it's a red flag, so he's getting red flags here. Floyd now gave me similar trouble when selecting a song, and maybe it has everything to do with my bias, but these 2 eels were just so darn hard to pick for. However, I didn't have quite as many songs for Floyd, and ultimately I was able to narrow it down to 1 without the help of the wheel. For Floyd, I think Notion by The Rare Occasions suits him. Now, this song is roughly about the validity of religion, which I don't think is a concept in Twisted Wonderland. We don't really get to see or get introduced to any religions in game, even though there are places like Noble Bell College and characters like Rolo that are influenced by the religious themes of their source material. So for this consideration, I'm abstracting these lyrics and looking at them through the lens of general morality instead, which can much more easily be related to Floyd, thus making my job of explaining this easier. Floyd is a very self-indulgent individual, one who has very little regard for anyone else. He does not, and I quote, give a flying fish, even in some cases, to his own detriment, like we see in Playful Land. To him, the things that are proper or morally good are just silly little limitations that stand between him and fun. Sure, some of them may be fine, but if they end up standing in his way, then they are going to get yeeted out of the window. For Floyd, notions like morality or propriety are naught but lies. Who cares if it's proper? If it's stopping you from living your life, then is it really that important? Why would you not put yourself first? These types of sentiments can be seen in Floyd's actions, like when he teases Riddle, busts down Sam's shop door to buy candy, presses the big old red do not press button in the second Halloween event, in his inconsistent basketball practice, in his lackadaisical attitude at the beginning of Beans Day, his dedication to taking Jamil down at the end of Beans Day, his moody test taking, his playful land tirade. Must I go on? He's also generically moody, bouncing between highs and lows, just like how life will do that. You're not always going to get sunshine, just like the song says, but there will be moments of good that do shine through the darkness. Floyd may be sad now, but he'll bounce back, and inevitably he'll reach a low point again too, only to come back on top, oscillating as it suits him. And none of this oscillation really has anything to do with morality. It just is what it is. To Floyd, all of these other notions are nothing but lies, much like the song suggests about the sentiments it's discussing. So I think viewing it through this lens of morality versus religion connects it very well to Floyd and his general MO. Next up is Scarabia and Kalim, who is such a sunshiny positive force in this otherwise bleak world that I just had to give him Aquarius slash let the sun shine in by the fifth dimension. Aquarius is a water sign that you could connect to Kalim's Oasis Maker due to that also involving water. And while that connection is flimsy at best, the overall tone of the song and the lyrics aren't. This song is really positive and hopeful, which I think suits Kalim exceptionally well. With peace guiding the planets and love steering the stars, there's absolutely nothing to worry about. Nothing at all. And I think this strikes a chord with Kalim's character. He not only projects sunshine, love, and happiness, but he lets it on in too, taking in all of the good while letting the bad plink right off him. While he is a little oblivious, I think this might actually be a learned behavior as Kalim actively chooses to see the good in the world and in others rather than confront the terrifying realities of the greed and hatred he's been a victim of on several occasions. This does make him a bit difficult to deal with, but I think his overwhelming generosity and general happiness overshadow some of his more negative qualities, and I think they just match the vibe of the song too well to equate him to anything else. Alrighty, so Jamil now is forever tied in my mind to conspiracy theories, partially because of the Animal Crossing video, but also because the dude is just never ever listened to, no matter what. He might as well be screaming into the void most days. And I feel like a lot of people that believe in conspiracies also tend to feel this way. Are there times where others listen to him? Absolutely. But in those moments, it's usually everyone but the person who has direct influence on his life that's listening. And this is an extremely frustrating situation to be in that hasn't really changed a whole lot since his overblot. Is what Jamil says true more often than not? Yes. Can the same be said about conspiracy theorists? No. But I do think that the overarching theme of please just listen to me for one darn minute is a vibe that Jamil shares with these tinfoil hatters. So the song I'm giving him is Touchtone Telephone by Lemon Demon. Jamil is constantly being pushed down with his voice silenced, all in service of a lord who is so oblivious it's painful. While this song is not about the dynamic between a rich person and their servant specifically, I think there are a lot of lyrical parallels that can be connected to Jamil's frustration. The first and most obvious is, of course, the line, I try and I try and I try to make you listen to me, which is basically a daily occurrence for this poor boy. I think this eloquently encapsulates Jamil's frustration with Kalim and with his part in life. We see this play out time after time in vignettes, the main story, and even the event story that centers around Jamil. Even though Kalim is now aware of his impositioning nature, he's not really changed, and it'll likely take a very long time for him to change, which means that poor Jamil is going to have to suffer a while longer. The chorus is also something that I think correlates to Jamil, specifically his schemes in Book 4. If we swapped unified theory with scheme and call with tell, I think the sentiment becomes rather obvious. Jamil's been trying to tell Kalim, Crowley, and pretty much anyone else with influence that this dynamic is not working. And he's not wrong. Kalim is, for all intents and purposes, a terrible house warden who's completely reliant on Jamil. Yet Jamil can't officially be house warden because Kalim exists. Jamil has to rehearse his lines in all of his dealings, even when they are way less dubious than overthrowing Kalim, as we can see him having to craft an entire story around his Beans Day plot in his vignette for that event, just to circumvent the possibility that he gets in trouble because Kalim got in trouble. And in Book 4, the truth quite literally comes from his very own mouth. It was perhaps not the best timing, but it was definitely the truth about him and the truth about Kalim, yet another lyrical tie-in. Even the lines towards the end of the song, I think, work super well for the plot of Book 4. The I'm an expert, I'm the one who was right all along, better to be laughed at than wrong. Because I can see this sentiment coming out during that final confrontation before the overblot. I guess this song is a bit more related to Book 4 Jamil than overall Jamil in a similar way as Azul's song was more related to his circumstances in his book, but I think the sentiment of this song and the desperation in the vocal performance to be heard really suits him. Even the little instrumental outro feels like the calm after the storm or a moment of clarity, which I think can be connected to his post Book 6 clarity. I also just like the imagery of Jamil's mind controlling powers being transmitted via radio, which has nothing to do with his character. I just think it's fun. Although he does get his whole spiel transmitted to the dorm by Azul, so I guess that's close enough. Now we'll move into Pomfiore and start with Vil. For Vil, I borrowed one of Floyd's songs because as I was listening to it, trying to write for Floyd, I just kept thinking about Vil instead. And it felt very odd to me because I don't think that this is a song that really matches his vibe. The other two songs I was deciding between, I think, would have fit this aesthetic way better. But I just think the vanity of I Don't Care by Fall Out Boy fits Vil's general motivations a bit more. While this song is way more self indulgent than I think Vil would appreciate, and likely isn't the best metaphor for him, the constant resounding chorus of As Long as It's About Me just kept pointing me to Vil. Vil's main goal is to stay on stage for as long as possible, for him to be the star that everyone craves, to be the fairest of all. And for him to do that, he's gotta stay in people's minds. As long as they are thinking about him, they won't be thinking about Nej, right? As long as he's on the top of everyone's minds, then he's got a chance to be on top of the world. And I think the very first lyrics of this song connect to this as well. Say my name and his, read Nej, in the same breath. I dare you to say they taste the same. I think this is a sentiment that resonates with Book 5 Vil, but honestly, even post Book 5, I think he still holds on to that desire to be differentiated from Nej, or to step out of Nej's shadow. During Book 5, we get to see how frustrated Vil is at constantly being compared to Nej, and how very few people actually understand their nuances. Even Rook, who gets it, still has more devotion for Nej than Vil, given his everything, which is probably also a thorn in Vil's side. He even gets a little defensive in Rook's labware vignette when Rook turns his attention towards Leona. I also think some of the other lyrics that allude to the entertainment industry or to success in general, like these friends don't love you, they just love the hotel suites, also connect to Vil's struggles to find true friends. He gets swarmed by folks at the beginning of Tapis Rouge, and he also assumed at first that Rook was like any other superfan, just trying to get close to him for the perks. So while this isn't his genre per se, I do think there is enough here lyrically that can connect to Vil to make this song work. Moving on to Rook. For his song, I chose something that's a bit more introspective and contemplative since I think Rook has a very unique view of the world, a philosophy that was likely crafted during his childhood travels, or at least his assumed travels, because I cannot fathom why his family wouldn't do that given the numerous teleporters they own. But regardless of the exact circumstances, Rook is demonstrably unique, so I'm giving him Bon Journée by Stromae. It's been a really long time since I have listened to this particular artist, and French is an enigma to me. But there is a certain calm that comes from this song that just reminds me of Rook. Perhaps it's the sampled bird song, the repetitive mentions of joy in the chorus, or just the chill beat that gives me the sense of peace. But I am given that sense of peace regardless, and I think that Rook overall is very at peace with himself and his decisions. He doesn't seem like the type to get hung up on anything, and I think he's also someone who's very self aware. Rook knows that what he does is creepy. He knows that not everyone's going to get it, and he's perfectly content with that. He's not going to force his way into someone's heart, and he's also understands boundaries well, even if he occasionally stretches their limits. And for all his charisma, poetic language, and stalking, the guy is best described, I think, by the word content. And that's the vibe I get from this song. It's one you can feel the desire to live regardless of the ups and downs and the acceptance of those changes. Based off the lyrics, it seems like the song is more or less about the feeling or desire to live regardless of the ups and downs and acceptance of those changes. Today is a good day, tomorrow might not be. But without the highs, there cannot be lows, and without the lows, there cannot be highs. You have to experience everything to have enough contrast to see the good and the bad, for without it, life becomes a formless void. Rook sees Vil for his strengths, Nej for his, and he's not bothered by their differences. Just because he loves one of them for different reasons doesn't mean that that love is greater than the other. or that one love is inherently better than the other. And I think Rook largely approaches his life and that which he considers beautiful in a very similar way. I think his willingness to share his joy, even if it isn't something that others may understand, is also reflected in the second verse of the song, or at least according to the translation that I found. I feel like Rook can sometimes get written off by his eccentricities. So I wanted to give him something with a bit more meaning in this consideration, because I do think he's a very interesting character with depth that can get overlooked due to those aforementioned factors. And the song is sung in French, and you can't get much more Rook than that, now can you? Now, for Epel, I picked a song that I just think is fun, despite the lyrics being very melancholic, which up until writing the script, I didn't realize was the case, because the song, Hometown Polka by Ruskaja, is in Russian, and I never bothered to look up the lyrics before. However, I got very, very stuck on this band for him, so we're just gonna go with it here. From my oblivious perspective, this song worked quite well because it's a polka, which is not only super duper fun, it's also a bit more traditional in nature, which I think fits the vibe of Harveston. Apple's hometown is largely influenced by Eastern European cultures, and although I don't believe Russia specifically was the sole inspiration for it, part of Russia is in Eastern Europe, and to my knowledge, it shares some cultural similarities with other countries in that region. Also, the title of the song is Hometown Polka, and who, out of all of our Twist boys, loves his hometown with a fiery vengeance? Epel. So when I was pulling this list together, I thought this would be a good song for Epel under the assumption that it was about the love for one's hometown, or even just the longing for one's hometown, because that would have been fine too. But instead, this song describes the longing for the youth long past, a history that can never be repeated, a love to never return, which are not problems that Epel is currently facing at all. So from a lyrical perspective, this song falls flat. But even if the lyrics don't make too much sense, I do like the idea of giving Epel a polka or some other song that can kind of connect to his roots in some way, since he's very much a country boy who likely won't ever move out of Harveston. But at the same time, I don't think he really fits the American country genre, and while I could have given him a punk rock song given his spiciness, I got so stuck on this very specific band because of the polka, despite there being 1,001 other polka songs out there. And I think this was largely because this band specifically combines a lot of traditional instruments and sounds with more modern rock ones. So their overall vibe, I think, works for Epel, even if the lyrics don't. He's traditional in some ways, but revolutionary in others, and he's trying to bring new ideas to a traditional area. When it comes to farming, he wants to incorporate more modern techniques while still respecting the traditions of his home. And I think music like this has similar intentions. Sure, there's a bit of rock and roll, but there is also trumpets and violins and the like. So while this specific song is ever so loosely tied to a singular aspect of Epel's character, I think it can work if you ignore the lyrics and just appreciate the music. Now into Ignihide we go, and we'll be starting off with Idia, who I think should get Insomnia by Eve, which you are absolutely going to have to loop because I cannot believe how much I wrote for this section. And while I'm going to try my best not to go so deep here, I must preface that I am, one, not a mental health professional at all. Two, this section is based on my personal interpretations of this song and Idia's situation. And three, there will be big spoilers for books 6 and 7 discussed. So if that is a problem for you, skip ahead to Sebek. Yes, Sebek. Ortho, Malleus, Lilia, and Silver are all going to have more spoilers. So plan accordingly and mosey on over to Sebek now if you want to avoid them. Everyone else, strap in. From what I understand, this song has themes of childhood trauma and the coping mechanisms that develop as a result. At least that's what the symbolism in the music video seems to speak to, and I think that's very topical for Idia. What happened when Idia was younger was very traumatic, and the loss of OG Ortho impacted him so greatly that he coped by making an entirely new Ortho who up until book 6 isn't truly sentient, but he is by Idia's side through everything. And I think Idia may be tempted at times to think of android Ortho as actual Ortho, despite knowing subconsciously the truth. In a way, this can be tied to the creature shown throughout the music video that saves the young Sunao from the truth of his memories. a being created solely to alleviate those past pains and shield the mind of their childhood self from what likely couldn't be understood at the time. At the start of the video, Sunao initially perceives everyone else around him as indiscriminate balloons, which I think can also be connected to Idia occasionally treating or viewing other folks at NRC as NPCs. In his school uniform vignette, he relates encountering Kalim to a flag in a game, which would also kind of imply that Kalim is an NPC in this scenario, and that the hangout is just an unfortunate cutscene Idia can't skip, which says a lot about where his mind is at during those early school days. I think there is a part of Idia that, despite his deep desire for connection, believes meaningful relationships are impossible given his situation with Styx. What use is there in viewing Kalim or anyone else as another player when they're only around for such a short part of his story? While in my memory this is never explicitly stated, I do think that Idia doesn't believe himself to be worth the effort, and his position within Styx compounds on this thought to not only isolate him, but reinforce his past failures. I'm going to be all alone forever. If only Ortho was still here, then maybe. Or something along those lines, which further reinforces the negative emotions while also blinding Idia to the other people around him. The intentions of Iria and Sunao are not the same, yet there is this release of energy in both of their stories that comes about as a result of those unresolved childhood emotions. The embracing of Sunao's inner child in that end segment, I think, can also be emblematic of the journey Iria had in Book 7 regarding his past. Beating up a phantom doesn't give me the same warm and fuzzies as the music video symbolism, but I think the parallel is there, and Idia must also confront those emotions head on in order to survive. He has to give himself enough grace to recognize his past failures without slipping back into them, and I think he does well during that confrontation to grab a hold of a much more positive future. But coming to terms with these emotions doesn't absolve Idia of the sins he's committed, and it doesn't do this for Sunao either. But both of them are now somewhere that I think will be conducive to them learning how to move forward. Idia now has sentient Ortho, and since no one's memories were erased during Book 6, he also has some other folks that he can connect with. That, and in the current released segments of Book 7, Idia's gathering an amazing crew to take down Malleus, which he does need Ortho and Silver's help for, but this collaboration and support I think are going to be beneficial for him in the long run. Sunao has Toby to rely on, or at least that's my assumption given the phone call in the beginning and Toby showing up to visit Sunao at the end, which has a similar feel, although again, these situations are very different. But this is a lot of connecting to imagery and not actually the contents of the song, so let's dive into those lyrics real quick. Lucky for me, Eve has blessed us all with an official translation in the closed captions, and the first chorus just works so well for Idia. It starts with Rise from the Ashes, which to me is reminiscent of the Overblot fiasco and Ortho's resurrection at the end of Book 6. The chorus then continues, like pawns on a board, it's my final move. I grit my teeth and struggle, but there's no going back to that night. I think this speaks very well to Idia's overall struggles, him constantly wanting to change the past but being unable to. He can't go back to that night where everything changed, and that's been a struggle for him to deal with. But in the moment of his overblot, he's finally got control over the game board. It's a gambit that he's willing to play because the reward of being able to overwrite his destiny and perhaps undo those past actions in some way is just too enticing. Let's get through this. Yes, we were connected all along, hidden deep in our hearts. It's just Ortho and Idia during the entire thing. It's just them. It just makes sense. And again, the next set of lyrics, I hope we can meet in the world I envision, is so perfect for this scenario. Even what follows, the always hiding behind jokes, my true feelings lodged in my throat, is just how Idia acts on a daily basis, with his big ego talking that it's true enough on the surface, but yet his insults tend to cover up his actual feelings and hide what's causing his shift in attitude. And lastly, as our voices filled the air, our story's not over. The plot twist has yet to come. This not only connects to the conclusion of Book 6, but also all of the actions we've seen so far in Book 7. Idia and Ortho and some of the other boys are all joining their efforts to flip the script on Malleus, to twist his plot, in order to save themselves and the world. At the end of the day, if none of Idia's past had happened the way it did, we would not be where we currently are, and we likely would not be able to save the world from a certain dragon. And all of that is just the first chorus. The second chorus starts off with From the Depths of Hell. And where is Hades from? Where is Idia coming from during his overblot? Where does he claw his way out of during book 7? And I've not even touched on the verses either, and there are a lot of lovely phrases in them that can connect to Idia's past and present. The hopelessness of what he went through, the constant worrying, the relief of his manic moment, the realizations of his future, killing the past he once thought was all that there ever would be. There's just so much here, so much, and I just want to keep yapping, but I think that that would be unfair given that we still have 5 more folks to go through, and if I go on, this is going to take forever. But enough about Idia. It's Ortho time, and I think for Ortho, our lovely little brother, he's going to get role-playing game by Soraru, Mafumafu, Uratanuki, and Ao no Sakata. This song revolves around RPG exploits of the various vocalists and their game-playing days. But it also gets a little existential and asks the question of what happens once the questing is done. I think this works well for Ortho because we get to see him actually live out an RPG IRL during book 6, and even afterwards, he continues to have that main character energy. He's got a unique constitution, and in a way, he kind of reminds me of the Chosen One trope because it feels like his chosen destiny is to stop Malleus. He can't do this alone, of course, so he firstly gets his puppy companions, and then he starts assembling the Twisted Avengers with his brother. He's literally compiling his party to take on the big bad, similar to the group of friends in the song doing much the same thing with their respective RPG games. Plus, I think the overall idea of an RPG fits Ortho more than some other game genres would, given that he and Idia seem to enjoy them so much, and a lot of their conversations during book 6 and then in book 7 revolve around the idea of the RPG game structure. The two of them, Ortho more specifically, is also really tied to the idea of a grand hero, as we can see in Idia's Overblot flashback with OG Ortho, and during the Ignihide section of book 7 with current Ortho. While these two Orthos are not the same, they do share that love for heroism and doing all the things that a hero would do. An RPG hero wouldn't care about the dwindling odds. As long as there is a chance, a sliver of hope, then the future can be saved. This line of thought is also what brought about our Ortho's sentience, so I think it's a sentiment close to his technomatic heart. The song is largely upbeat, fun, and has a bit of chiptune sampling, I think, which also connects to Ortho's digital nature since he is an AI after all. The vibes are good, the theming is appropriate, and I can see Ortho appreciating the song, if nothing else. Now, heading into Diasomnia's territory, we're starting off with the man, the myth, the legend, Malleus Draconia. And for him, I've picked a super sad song that I think fits his pre-book 7 plight, and that song is Mazarenai by Zaza. This song is very poetic in ways that I do not fully comprehend, but the visuals of the music video do help my comprehension. And on the whole, what I get from this song is a sense of longing for something that can never be. To so desperately want to be with someone in whatever form that takes, but your differences are too much to overcome, and it just gets too messy to work. The name of the song, I believe, means cannot be mixed or something along those lines, and Malleus's problems of loneliness stems from this very concept. Malleus is almost too much of a myth to exist alongside his peers, and his overwhelming power, something he had no say in obtaining, distances him too much from them. Couple that with the differences between Fae and human culture, and I think you can begin to understand why this song might suit him. While I desperately hope that he will be able to find the common ground, a gray area that isn't too muddy or messy, where he can have the kinds of relationships he desires with people outside of the Briar Valley and outside of the Fae, he's not really been doing too much to accomplish that as it stands. Part of this is just because he has to learn how to do such things, which is understandable enough. Heck, even Riddle is learning how to relate to his peers, and he's not an overpowered dragon. But the progress with Malleus has been slower to his detriment, and now to the detriment of others. I believe he even mentions in his dorm uniform vignette that humans are just so difficult to understand. Not that he minds, in fact, he finds it to be quite the experience. But he also expresses that he thinks it'll take another 100 years or so for humans and Fae to truly understand one another, which may be a bit of Fae humor, but it is also a bit glum. Now, I believe the song lyrics are meant to involve the mixing of something slightly different from straight up culture. However, the sentiment of this impossible differences is still there, and I think this is something that Malleus does feel throughout the story. The main difference between the song and his attitude, I think, is that Malleus still has a great deal of hope for a positive outcome, where the song is a bit more resigned. But I do think there are pieces that match well enough to put these two together here. But y'all know how I had a hard time picking for Jade and Floyd. You know who else gave me a really hard time? That's right, Lilia. I just couldn't pin down an angle from which to pontificate for him. Does he get something metal due to his musical tastes? Does he get something old timey because he's a peapod? Does he get something inspiring due to his role as a mentor? Does it make more sense to connect to his past, his present? I had so many questions and so many songs to pick from, but ultimately I narrowed it down to Changes by David Bowie. Firstly, I think if Lilia met David Bowie, the two of them probably would have vibed, at least based on what little I know about the musician, anyways. Secondly, and more importantly, Lilia has been through a lot and has seen a lot, and many of the things he has experienced and seen have changed dramatically over the years. Lilia quite literally faced the changes of the world around him, and he gained a lot from that, including changes in his perspective. If there ever was someone who can attest to the power of the passage of time, it is Lilia. And I think he also has the perspective to understand what folks are going through. We get to see him mentor various characters at various points in the story, and during those consultations, Lilia doesn't ever overstep. He's not telling anyone how to act or how to live. He's simply trying to give them some insight so that they can make their own decisions. And I can see the lines, and these children that you spit on, as they try to change their worlds, are immune to your consultations. They're quite aware of what they're going through, reflecting or tying to this in some way. I also think that the don't want to be a richer man and just going to have to be a different man also work well for Lilia because he's very well aware of what true wealth is, and he's also embraced his new philosophies with gusto, becoming someone who's almost unrecognizable from his past self, though he's not entirely foregone some of his earlier characteristics. While it may be somewhat subtle in some areas, I think the overall sentiment of the song does work very well for Lilia, at least to me, so that's what I'm going to give him here. So now, Silver may be a softie, but I think he's got some true hidden strength that not only make him more complex and interesting as a character, but given the role he's been playing in Book 7, I think it's very fitting for him to receive the song Fight the Tide by Colm McGuinness, Jonathan Young, and Judge and Jury. Now, this song really isn't deep, if I'm being honest. It can basically be summed up by the chorus, and overall, it's quite repetitive. But I think the sentiment is extremely important and it matches what Silver has going on. No matter what struggles you face, no matter the hardships, no matter the consequences, you have to fight and stay alive. This is a sentiment that Lilia has drilled into Silver, and is something that he holds onto during critical moments of Book 7. And I think him being the Aurora or Philip twist connects him to the line, every darkness has to end in morning light. His father was the Dawn Knight, and while he doesn't want to claim the bad of this past, Silver does spend a considerable amount of time battling his own emotions after this revelation, given his sense of duty to Malleus. There is guilt that he has to fight past. There is literally darkness and blot that he has to fight past, and the blot is kind of an inky substance, so you can relate it to a tide of sorts. And there are things that he had to realize for him to be able to move forward into the later parts of Book 7, and I assume he will be playing a very important role in the conclusion of Book 7, just given who he is twisted from and who Malleus is twisted from, and their relationship at their source. There is guilt that he has to fight. There are things he has to realize, and there is hope that he needs to find. All of which happens in that segment where he is fighting the literal tide of his emotions. While we help Silver with these things at the end of that segment, I don't think we can downplay his own realizations and resolutions that come as a result of that situation at all, because I have no doubt that Silver will be playing a pivotal role in the finale of Book 7. And to do that, he needed to go through this experience. I'm sure that he's going to be just as pivotal at the end of the story as he has been up to this point. But since this recording is happening before the resolution of Book 7 on the EN server, I can't say for sure or give any concrete evidence for these feelings. But given that Silver is so closely tied to Aurora and Prince Philip, he has to somehow have some important moment during the climactic ending of this book because Malleus is so heavily tied to Maleficent. And if Twist has taught us anything, the source material does have an impact. Silver, in all of this, is fighting the tide. He's fighting the blot, he fought his own emotions, and no matter how much the pains of the past have hurt, and no matter what he may have to do in the future, given the glum circumstances that they are all in, Silver is going to move forward and going to pursue the peace that he so desperately desires with his whole chest, regardless of any of those consequences. And I feel like this song is very emblematic of that kind of determination. And last but not least is Sebek, who I feel deserves a very hardcore song because he's just such a hardcore diehard fan of Malleus and is so dedicated to protecting him, so I'm giving him the song Fellows of the Hammer by Windrose. Now, is Sebek a dwarf? No. But is Sebek extremely proud of his Fae heritage? Oh, hell yes. And you know who else is really proud of their heritage? Tolkien's dwarves, which are the fantasy race that largely inspires the band Windrose. A lot of their songs revolve around dwarvish culture, and this one is no exception. However, the dwarvish culture of Tolkien's world kind of revolves around avarice, which is a characteristic not at all shared by the Briar Valley. In fact, you could say that they are complete opposites in this way. But thankfully, the dwarves are not one-dimensional, as they also are proud warriors who value brotherhood and family. The Briar Valley is run by prideful dragons, and I think there is a lot of camaraderie between the different Fae that live there, in part due to the war 500 years ago, but in part just because of their shared heritage. Sebek, for his part, is really dedicated to the Fae side of his family and is very proud to be of that heritage. His grandfather, a former general, is a source of inspiration for him, and I think Sebek has trained so hard for so long, in part to be like Bauer, but also because of his dedication to the crown. I cannot imagine what Sebek would be like without Malleus. The guy is basically Sebek's life, and the loyalty that he has for Malleus and his duty is second to none. Sebek is so dedicated, in fact, that his constant martial training for Malleus's sake is what caused his special magic to manifest. So, a song like this one, a song that speaks to the brotherhood shared between warriors of various clans, all united under the banner of shared heritage, feels like such a Sebek thing. The promised home that I believe Sebek to desire is not the same one as the dwarves in the song are looking for, nor is their idea of glory the same, I think. But the way that they are pursuing those dreams and the energy with which they are putting into those pursuits is very similar. So that's where I landed for this crocodile. And those are all the songs I think fit the main Twist cast, but there are hundreds of thousands of songs out there, and my tastes may not match yours, so I'm insanely curious as to what songs you'd assign these guys and why. Let me know also if you ended up agreeing with my takes or if you thought I was completely off the mark. And if you liked this video and want more content like it, please let me know that as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe too before you go, and as always, I just have to remind you that you're amazing, and I hope you have a wonderful day.